Hello and welcome to the Everyday Adventure podcast. My name is Nikki Bass and I'm a business psychologist, army veteran and everyday adventurer. I will be sharing my conversations with some truly incredible guests who are weaving adventure into their daily lives. And I really hope that these conversations inspire you to undertake your own everyday adventures too. So I am so excited today to be speaking to the wonderful Emma Simpson. Emma is a wild swimmer and writer who specialises in narrative nonfiction. And having spent 2 decades working in air traffic control, she combines her years as an observer of human behaviour in high-pressure environments with her love for listening to people share their stories, particularly on the shore of a lake. And her current book, Breaking Waves, is an exploration of femininity and water. And in it, she shares stories from around the world that demonstrate the power of connection and humanity, which I think is something we can all agree is very much needed at the moment. And just to demonstrate that connection, and how connection can work. So I came across Emma when my fabulous sister-in-law, Lindsay, tagged me in a post she'd put on LinkedIn. And she said, Nikki, I think you'd be really interested in this. Tag me in it. Emma and I started chatting. We had a conversation, which was probably about 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I really don't know where the time goes. But have wanted to speak to Emma for the podcast for so long, and it's just getting the right timing. And she's had a super busy schedule, and I've been sort of dotting here, there, and everywhere. So I am so excited that we finally managed to connect and to get behind the microphone in our respective squares on Zoom and to have this conversation. So Emma, welcome so much to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Nikki. Thanks so much. And yeah, I was going to say it was about 2 years ago. And it's funny because when we first chatted, I was like, oh, I'm writing this book. This is the idea. And it was all information. And then as time passed and we kept rescheduling, it's like, well, I'm nearly finished it now. And now we're meeting and it's like, okay, it was published last month. So it's actually come at a really nice time. But yeah, I've been really looking forward to speaking to you.
Oh, brilliant. And yeah, and it is so interesting, isn't it, how that works in terms of time? Because I was thinking, actually, it's lovely to be able to speak to you now, having known you were working on it, and now to know that it's published and out in the world. And I know you've been incredibly busy with promoting it and with speaking to people and getting the book out in the world. So obviously that's something that we're going to talk about now. And I guess I'd just love to start with, if you could just share a little bit more about Breaking Waves, what your sort of inspiration, your motivation for it was. Where did the idea come from?
Yeah, of course. So it's one of those things people often say to me, did you always have a book in you? And I don't know that I did. But one thing that I did always find as a go-to when life throws what life throws at you was writing. I've always found that writing has been something that I've done and really enjoyed, found sort of real pleasure in that flow state, whether I've been writing on things like children's poetry and just playing around with words. And when I've had difficult times in my life, writing was a go-to, but also in the last 10 years, the open water became another thing. And the sort of draw to that really came about when I was in the depths of grief after my brother died quite tragically. And it was one of these real primal pulls to the water, and something that I hadn't really anticipated because I wasn't really a big swimmer. But as I started to discover how freeing and healing and shifting open water was for me in terms of my grief and supporting my mental health and those kind of things, I started doing it more and more. And how the book then came about is, after having come out of my air traffic career, which was as a result of chronic health conditions and mental health vulnerabilities after everything that happened around and after my brother's death, and I do write about that in the book, I walked away from that high stress career and found myself at the shores of the lake where I swim really regularly, just a bit lost, really. Like, who am I now? What's my identity? What do I do? That awful question that you always get asked, like, what do you do? And I was like, I don't know what I do now. But I've come away from that really well-defined career. But as I was at the lake, I just started chatting to people, mainly women, because it was mainly women that I met there. And they all have these amazing stories. And I just got this idea and I thought, well, we all have such extraordinary stories, Nothing is, stranger than fact, really. I think that's so true. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I could write some of these down and weave these into some kind of thread. So that's where the idea of the book came about. And initially, I was following a group of English Channel swimmers at my local lake who were doing it for a local charity. So it was kind of focused around that. And one of the women who was leading the group said, said to me that awful question, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm a writer. And I was like, oh my God, I'm totally lying because I haven't yet written anything or published anything. But, she believed me and she just sort of said straight back, oh, would you like to maybe write some of our story? And I was like, oh my God, yes, great, amazing. And I was like, shit, now I've got to do this. But it was really exciting because I was like, well, I do write and I can write and I want to write. But, you feel like you can't own that identity, don't you, until you've got something out there or published, which is nonsense. So I started to write about these wonderful women locally, but then the pandemic hit and all the plans to meet and gather and train together obviously fell apart. But what did happen during that time is that I then got in touch with women much further afield and started interviewing women from around the world about their relationship with water. So it expanded from being about the story of these local women, which was a great story, to more of a sort of the links between womanhood and water and what is so fundamental about it. And then I was speaking to people in Fiji and Africa and Canada and Finland, and it just started to turn into something so special.
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, there's so many points I could pick up in what you just said. I think, there's something about, I think your point around identity and that, interesting that I suppose the connection between water and identity, and as well this idea of sort of shifting and changing and the ebb and flow, and that we're one thing at one point and then, shift into something else, and that's not always comfortable.
Yeah.
But that it's also very hard to resist at the same time. And that as it's, as you feel your identity shifting, it's like, you can choose to try and push back against that. And so many of us do for so many very good reasons. And yet at the same time that you sort of get pulled towards it. And I love your point around, because I think so many people will resonate with this sort of thing of at what point can I own that
Yeah.
label or that identity that I'm ascribing to myself.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the water just presents the most extraordinary metaphor for all of these things, exactly as you say. And I do say that the phrase, the ebb and flow, a lot, the ebb and flow of life. And it is that dichotomy and the push and pull. And, the water represents adventure and excitement and bravery and courage, but also danger and fear and, resistance and all those things. And so when I spoke to people, it became something that I never expected it would be, I think, because suddenly I might be talking to someone about a birthing experience in water. So it's not, it's not a swimming book in that sense at all, even though a lot of the stories were gathered around those areas. And then other people spoke to me about things like swimming in sacred waters in indigenous parts of Western Canada and extraordinary experiences there. So there was like these real deep connections with the water as well. But, there just kept being these repetitive threads coming through around healing and the real sort of primal pull to it in times of need and the freedom that it gave to people as well in their various different circumstances.
Mm. I was just thinking, I mean, were there any particular, I mean, I'm sure, obviously, as you've written into the book, all the stories were, profound and meaningful to you and resonated. Were there any particular moments while you were writing the book or, moments within a story that you, I guess, that spring to mind when you think back over the process and think, oh, that was a moment that, opened up another perspective or, really, really resonated with me?
Yeah, there were many. And I think one of them was when I interviewed a swimmer from New York called Jamie Monaghan, who is a multiple world record holding marathon swimmer and ice swimmer and has swum ice miles in all the continents, which is basically a mile in water under 5 degrees, wearing only a swimsuit and goggles and a hat. So no wetsuit, no gloves, no boots. And when I chatted to her, I was expecting it was going to be, about maybe just talking about some of her achievements and some of those things, but it really wasn't like that at all. And this was quite early on in the process, and it's one of the things that really started to change the course of the book. Because one thing she spoke about when I asked her about her most profound moments in the water, one of the things she said was when she was swimming in Antarctica, it was the taste of an iceberg. And it was when she was swimming through the salt water and then suddenly realized she was tasting fresh water, and it was the
Oh
melting
gosh.
glacier. And I was like, wow, oh my God, that is so profound and so connecting in so many ways. And that she was witness to this amazing environment that is changing so rapidly. And then also when we spoke about the New York swims, of which she's done many. I mean, she's circumnavigated Manhattan Island 4 times consecutively. It's extraordinary. But she spoke about the fact that when she gets into the water, she gets in by the NYPD police memorial for 9/11, and her father was in the police and died as a result of 9/11. So actually, our conversation became about loss. And I wasn't sort of expecting that. And that started to change subliminally, I think, change how the way the whole book went. So really, a lot of the stories, everyone would have this kind of loss and recovery, and it's not necessarily loss of a person. It might be loss of a career or loss of an identity or loss of self, if you've had a child, or loss of, a friendship or a relationship. So it really made me think that one of the only common experiences that we will have is this, that we go through that, and it's about how we get through that and knowing that we're not alone.
Gosh, it's so powerful, isn't it? And yeah, just literally as you were saying it, I was thinking, that thing that eh, because loss is talked about so infrequently, or it's talked about as maybe a unique event or experience, or that
Yeah.
some people go through it, or but that, as you say, it defines human experience, that that throughout the course of our lives, and it's lost in so many different ways, like you said, it can, and that, but it's still this idea that in order, I guess, for change to occur, a lot of the work that I do with people is thinking about, are you, even if I'm working with organizations and things, and there's bit, a very sort of, business type level. It's about, oh, well, we've been taken over by this company, or, I've been asked to move roles or whatever, or being made redundant, and talking about the processes of that. But actually
Yeah.
that unless you address that loss and are able to grieve that loss, actually it's very hard to move forward from it, and we can become stuck and ruminate and become really caught up in it. So I think there's something very profound in what you're saying around how uh, behind so many well behind all those stories in the end
Yeah.
are these stories. Those are the moments that ground us and make us think and make us reflect on who we are and what we need.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a part of the human experience. And I think we talk about loss in such a binary way, in that, when you talk about loss, you're like, oh, who's died? And okay, that is a huge part of it. But also, even in that circumstance, we're so scared of it. Like, it's like we give somebody a window, like, okay, during this period, you can grieve because it happened yesterday and you've got a week, and now the funeral's over, or now you've got a new job, or now you're in a new relationship, or whatever it may be. And I talk about loss of physical capabilities as well. As someone who suffers with chronic illness, I've had to grieve the loss of my body's capabilities and the things I used to be able to do that I can no longer do. And so you have to grieve all of these things, but we don't really have space for that. We're just like, oh yeah, your window's done now, let's move on. And I think, we don't even all experience love in our life, but we all experience loss and these inevitable changes that we don't have control over, which is where it can be really uncomfortable. And so the book is really about, this is my mechanism that really helped me move through that. And that mechanism for someone else might be dancing or running or art or any number of things, so it really is that universal experience.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking about, one of the questions I typically ask my guests is around, what was the biggest challenge in terms of, particularly if we're talking about an adventure. And I think what's interesting is thinking about, writing a book, and like you said, that process of coming to the story or the stories that you are wanting to tell, and the thread that's coming together. I would imagine that there are, I mean, I've not written a book, but I can imagine that there are quite a few challenges and hurdles along the way with that process. And I guess given the personal nature of your book as well, I was just, what were some of those challenges that you faced, and how did you navigate them, and I guess what helped?
Yeah, I think there's several, and I mean, I have loved it, I have to say, but it's hugely exposing, and particularly because it is such a personal narrative. There's such vulnerability in it, and so I'd write something down and just think, oh God, oh God, oh God. Do I want my husband's great uncle reading that? Or do you know what I mean? And then you suddenly have this kind of thought, and he's like, don't worry, he won't read it. Or do I want my children? I've got two daughters who are 18 and 16, so they're not little, but there are things in there that they wouldn't have known about me and things like that. So, but I think there's a real sense of, I don't know, like it's all about bravery and fearlessness as well. It's like these things I think really important to talk about. And when I'd have conversations with someone like yourself or people at the lake, they'd be like, yeah, no, we don't talk about this enough. And I feel that, and I've had that experience. And God, I wish I'd felt that I wasn't alone and that kind of thing. And so there were challenges in terms of my own fear at being that vulnerable and open. There were challenges around the process because it's new to me. I came from air traffic control. I've never worked in publishing. So a lot of second guessing myself, and is this normal? And am I going to get a book deal? And what does it mean if I don't? And will I be self-publishing? And, trying to navigate a whole new industry. But also I think the most care I wanted to take around everything was around the women that spoke to me, because some of them have the most heartbreaking stories, and one incredible woman whose story was, well, they'll all stay with me forever, but who lost a child, and it was after a series of other events. And when she spoke about some of the other things that had happened to her, and she had been retired from the army due to injury, and I really related to that kind of having to come out of a career you've basically been institutionalized in for health reasons, hugely related to that. And I was already sort of there alongside her. And then when she spoke about the death of her son, I almost didn't know what to do with it. And I had to sort of go away. And I felt it was such a privilege for her to share those words with me, but I needed to make sure it was held in the right way. And so that was a huge challenge in itself. Like, how do I replay this and translate this back to her? And very much I did that, I just, with her approval on every step of the way, because I'm like, oh God, I hope I'm doing it justice. I hope it's sensitive enough. I hope it's, it's bringing across the right feelings and messages. So that was a huge challenge in making sure I held everybody in the right way. And then also there were some sort of technical writing challenges, I guess, in terms of, so what happened after I'd interviewed all these women, and I got signed by an agent quite quickly, which was amazing. But when I went to meet the head of the agency, he was asking me what the book was about. And I was saying, oh, it's women and water and how we navigate the ebb and flow of life, and talking about all the metaphors and these beautiful stories. And he was a bit like, yeah, I get that, but what's it really about? And I was getting a bit nervous and a bit sweaty and sort of going, oh God, what do I say next? And he was really pushing me. He was like, what's the hook and what's the thing that's going to make the reader turn the page? You've described something very beautiful, but sounds like a collection of essays. What are you all about, Emma? And I said, okay, well, for me, everything is about my brother's death and my life before and my life after, and the devastation of my family and the coming back together, and just how the open waters helped me through that process. And he was like, right, okay, that's your story, write that. And I was like, wow, okay, amazing, because I never expected to bring my brother into the book, which was actually such a lovely thing to do. But then I had this technical writing challenge of how do I wrap everyone else's stories around it? Because when it was kind of like 12 sort of vaguely focused on other people's stories, it was much easier. But that became a challenge. But that, I think, is what hopefully has made it really special, because there is this consistency and this arc, and every part of my arc, one of them fitted around it.
Gosh, it's amazing how that, I mean, it's, yeah, like, so I can imagine having that sort of drawn out at the point at which you've written or you've spoken to all these women, you have all of these stories. And just your point about, that responsibility you feel for holding people's stories as well. I
Yeah.
can imagine that was quite a moment of, oh gosh, but how amazing that it's that actually you found a way to weave it in, and it's, like you said, it actually just connected so beautifully as well. And I suppose slightly linked to that as well is this idea that, that, I mean, there's the obvious benefits that we think about. So many people have an idea about writing a book or wanting to write a book, or, this sort of ambition, for all sorts of different reasons. And, I guess there's the sort of more obvious benefits that we think of in terms of writing that, whether it's being able to share a story or, for if people want to do it for sort of profile raising, whatever it
Yeah.
is. And I was just wondering, having now sort of gone through that process and being where you are, what are the things that really, I get that were unexpected about it, that you think, gosh, I never anticipated that this would happen when I first sort of even thought of this kernel of an idea. And actually it's been one of the, it's been such a bonus, or it's become one of the reasons why this has been such an important experience.
There are a lot of things actually, but I think one that springs to mind really is the fact that I got to honor my brother's story. So I never expected that would happen. I'd never, he died 18 years ago, and it's a massive part of still all of our lives, and he's still very much central to how I am and why I do the things I do. But to be able to, that was a real surprise, because when it started out being about women and water, it never occurred to me that would come into it. So that was really, really special. And that just gave me such a sense of, I don't even know if cathartic is the right word. It's more than that. It was just an unexpected joy to be able to go back and think through and think about us together as children, and with my sister as well, and to talk about us in that sort of lovely, fond way, which was not, it wasn't a sad process, it was a joyful process. So that was really unexpected. Another thing is that the community that I've met through writing, so the open water community is talked about a lot and it's hugely strong, but my God, the writing community is so lovely and generous. And I go to festivals and events and do a lot online and write on a platform called Substack, and people are just so friendly and supportive. And it was quite strange being in a world where people really want you to succeed all the time. They're just like championing you and telling everyone about you and inviting you to festivals and come and talk here. And, I'd reach out to authors if they'd endorse the book, and think, well, they're not going to say yes to me because I'm nobody, because I don't have a name out in the world. And they would say yes. And, I was like, wow. So that was unexpected. And I think the other thing is the impact it had on my daughters. So it's quite interesting because they've obviously been bystanders to me doing a totally different career. And my husband's in the fire service. So that's always been very interesting, like, what he does and rescuing people and stuff like that. And I think it comes back full circle a bit to our point about identity. I was like, well, now that I'm a writer and, it's the income and all that is massively reduced, and I don't know if it's going to get out there, and I don't know if it's going to be a success, and is anyone going to buy it? I think maybe I felt that in some respects, maybe it didn't seem as inspiring to them or something. I don't know, because before that I'd been a woman in a technical career and senior, do you know what I mean? In real senior leadership roles and blah, 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 and going off talking to NASA and stuff. But actually they have been so much more inspired by this. And that was amazing. I had a book launch. I've had several events recently, but I had one on the actual publication date at the lake where I swim with friends and family. And oh my God, my daughter rushed up to me, my youngest, afterwards, and was just like, Mum, I am so proud of you. I am so proud of you. You are amazing. This is a teenager, a 16-year-old. And I was just like, oh my God.
Oh gosh, isn't that amazing? It's making me well up.
I know.
This is how gorgeous.
And I hadn't even considered how it might seem to them. I thought maybe they think, oh, now Mum's just sort of not just a stay-at-home mum, because I'm home all the time because I'm writing. So maybe I didn't even know that they'd really noticed. Do you know what I mean? And they were so invested in it, and they're telling everybody about it. And, one of my daughter's like sports coaches was like, yeah, she's been counting down the days. They don't. It's like, wow. So, yeah.
Gosh. It made me think actually that thing of, because this idea of being inspirational or inspiring people, or what inspires other people is so, or what our children need as well, or what they need to see, is talked about again so much. And we're sort of pushed, these are inspiring role models, these need. And it just, I guess it just resonated with me in terms of thinking about the reason I started the podcast was because I find the people who inspire me are my friend who'd never put on a pair of trainers and then is started doing park run, or
Yeah.
or my mum going out for a longer walk, or managing to get up a mountain, and as she's done recently, right, the doctorate and stuff. But that it's like the people who are close to us, but when they do things that they don't need to be, it's like we think inspiring from a logical point of view is this huge, first, amazing, and what you've done is amazing. But it's also that thing of, actually sometimes it's about people being brave enough to take a different path, or doing something that means something hugely important to them, and seeing the people that we love light up in terms of what they're doing too.
Yeah. Oh God, that's so true. And I think that's so important. And that's why that was really such a surprise to me, because even though it's not the way I view the world, we still exist in a society that feels defined by status and financial, remuneration and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I suppose still somewhere subliminally, I was like, well, I had that impressive sounding job title and a nice salary, and now I don't. So yeah, and I'm just sort of sitting there at home scribbling all the time. But actually, for them, it's been really quite fundamental, because my eldest daughter, actually at the end of her lower sixth year, decided she'd made the wrong choices, and we had a long talk about it, and she went and did her lower sixth again in a completely different college and a completely different course. And I think I felt so proud of her, and I was like, hopefully in some way I've kind of shown them that you can take a completely different path, and it's okay. And giving people permission to think, oh, I've always wanted to do that, or I wish I'd done that. And I'm like, just fuck it, do it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so to give that down to that generation has been an absolute delight.
Yeah. No, and your point around courage too. What does courage look like? And
Mm.
sometimes it is, yeah, having the courage to go, I've made a choice, and that choice now no longer sits with me in the same way, or it's, I've thought again, and actually this is what I want to do. And how incredible to do that at the age of 16, 17 as well. I think there are a lot of adults who would really struggle, and
Yeah.
for very
Yeah.
understandable reasons with doing it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I was so, so proud of her, because that's a really brave thing to do at your age, and to separate from all your friends, and to go back a year so you won't be going to university at the same time. But the steeliness with which she did it, and the confidence that actually it's okay to make a change. I was like, wow, that is amazing. And there was me getting a book deal at the age of 51, having never worked in that industry before. So I think I hadn't realized how much impact those kind of things have.
Yeah. So I'm slightly hesitant to ask my next question to you, given you're in the middle of a book promotion and tour and all the but when you think sort of ahead to the future as much as you can or want to do, I mean, what's next on the horizon for you? Where would you dare to dream to go, and also maybe what's concrete next as well?
Ah, it's the dare to dream. So I have about 4 book ideas in my head, 2 of which I'm currently writing. So in the concrete sense, then I'm writing my second book at the moment, which is about tea. I've been sat here sipping tea as I'm talking to you. And I trained as a tea sommelier last year because I love
Oh,
tea.
wow.
I know, and I've always been
Tea is
fascinated
awesome, to
by
be fair.
tea. Yeah, it is awesome. I mean, on any adventure you go on, you got to have your tea, right?
Yep.
No matter where you are in the
I'm
world.
so with you.
So I trained in and did all these studies around tea and the history and the culture and how we pass down our own cultures in ways other than words. And so I'm writing a whole thing around tea. So that's the kind of concrete stuff. And then an aspirational one in the Dare to Dream category, a couple of books later on, is about Antarctica. I am quietly obsessed with Antarctica. I did actually apply for a role there last year, which is as a radio operator for the British Antarctic Survey, back to my air traffic background. What I would love to do is actually be able to apply for that role and at the same time write a book. I'm very drawn to the ice. I'm drawn to that landscape. I've never been there, but there's an incredibly strong pull. And for me, swimming in that water and that adventure would be the ultimate thing. So I don't know. That's my dare to dream, is that maybe in a couple of years when the girls are older. I mean, I applied for it last year, which was ridiculous because one of my daughters was still 15. But I did chat to them, and they were like, "We'd love to have you, but you know, tell us when you can actually." When you can actually come. And I was like, yeah, I was just sort of thinking, oh, can I just leave home for 6 months? And my husband was like, not really.
Oh, I do have those moments as well. Yeah.
Not really. And I'm like, I know I can't really, but I want to, and let me dream that I'm going to. And, you know, so yeah, I think somehow, somewhere I'm going to get to the ice.
Yeah. No, how exciting. First of all, to have your second book ongoing. And I just love the concept. I'm a massive tea fan. So I can't drink coffee. It makes me go a bit nuts.
Yeah.
And talk way too much. So, but yeah, tea, like I feel like my day hasn't started until I've had my cup of tea in my favorite mug.
Exactly.
And yeah, so it's something just about how it just, settles you, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Wonderful. And yes, I love your dream. So it's so interesting. I was just connecting back with your story about the tasting the iceberg and that. Yeah, I was like, yeah.
Yeah, and
Sorry, carry on.
I think that was a massive, you know, I'd always sort of thought about it before and then I had that interview with Jamie, and I was like, oh, that's it. I need to taste.
I'm sold. Get me there.
Yes, absolutely. And then I sort of look at things, and you know, sometimes I see, oh, well, you can do. There's writers' bursaries to go and spend time out there, and I'm like, right, okay, I'm going to apply for that. I'm going to do that. I mean, a slight hiccup has been my health in recent years, but hopefully that's on the up as well. So you know, I'm hoping that when the girls are a bit older, and if I'm in good strength and all that sort of stuff, you never know. You never know.
My fingers crossed.
Yeah,
incredible.
I don't know exactly what aspect I'd write about, but there'll be so much. I can almost feel it. Yeah.
Amazing. So if there's someone listening to this and they're thinking, I'd love to either make an identity shift or a change, or I've got this idea for an adventure that I would love to get started on, whether that's writing a book or wild swimming or anything else out there, from your experience of everything that you've done, what's one piece of advice that you would give them?
It's so tricky because I think we're so conditioned to put barriers in the way of everything that we can't do. And normally we always say, well, I can't afford it, or I've got to pay the bills, or, you know, there's always a reason not to. So I think you've just got to swipe that aside. And I think my piece of advice would be that you don't have to go like to the nth degree with it, you know, just dip your toe in the water, you know, just start. And if you like writing, just write for fun. You know, don't sort of suddenly say, I've got to give up my job and write a book. That makes it too difficult. Jamie, the iceberg lady, again, she has a phrase which is do something that scares you every day. So I love that. And I think it's a bit like put yourself out there. What's the worst that can happen? But you don't have to go big, you know, you can just just put your toe in the water.
Yeah, love it. And the perfect analogy, I think, for the whole conversation. So if people want to find out more about you, more about the book, where can they go?
So I write on Substack, which is a platform, and Emma Simpson author. I have a publication on there called Lemon Soul, SOUL, and on Instagram at Emma Simpson author, and Facebook for the same. So yeah, I'm hopefully quite easy to find. And obviously in Waterstones, go and find the book is on. I think it's stocked in every Waterstones in the country, which is mind-blowing.
Amazing.
Absolutely mind-blowing. And it's now on audio and all that. So yeah, I'd really love to hear if your listeners do read it or listen to it, what they think and what resonates. So yeah, that would be a pleasure.
No worries. Well, I'll pop all of those links in the show notes for you as well, so that anyone can go out there and find it and connect with you on Substack and and find the book and read it and go into Waterstones and go and buy a copy as well.
Yeah.
Emma, it's been such an absolute pleasure to speak to you. I could have kept this going for a very long time. I had so many other things I wanted to talk about. But I'm so glad that we finally managed to connect and talk. And yeah, it's just been brilliant. And wishing you all the very best with both your second book as well and your trip to Antarctica when it happens.
Yeah, I'll come back and tell you about that one.
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely another podcast in there.
Totally. Thank you so much for having me, Nikki. It's been a pleasure.
Amazing. Take care. Bye. So an enormous thank you to Emma for coming on the podcast and being part of season 8. So many different points in that conversation that I could choose to reflect on. I think what I keep coming back to is the point of the conversation where we talk about loss and about grief, but particularly this idea of loss and change and how that's related to taking on different new identities as well. And the reason I think it really resonated with me, because I think we can talk about loss in terms of a huge event in our lives, the loss of a loved one, of something that is truly life-changing and where the grief is so all-consuming. But I think there's also the element of loss that we all experience on a regular basis, but also at particular stages in our lives. And I think particularly, if I think of my own circumstances and my own context, as a woman who's about to turn 50 as I record this, and that in a way milestone age shift, thinking about myself as somebody, I think I'm still convinced I'm around 25, which in some ways is a good thing and sometimes is not, because I tend to push myself into places and doing things that maybe I could, maybe temper a little, shall we say, to aid my recovery. But I think part of, getting older, part of transitioning into different life stages is also, whilst there can be excitement and there can be lots of, positive aspects to it, there is also an aspect that is about loss, that is about change, there is about grieving the self that maybe we're leaving behind. Whilst in my head I might think I'm 25, actually the reality is I will not be that 25-year-old self again. And that there are changes, whether it is, changes in terms of our bodies and what we're capable of or capable of recovering from, whether it is in our physical appearance and noticing additional lines and wondering, questioning what is my feeling about that there are so many different layers of societal expectation, but also in terms of ourselves, actually, who is this person that I am becoming and moving towards? How do I feel about that line on my face or my, how do I feel about the representation of myself as a woman in her 50s? Where does that sit with me? And I think whilst there is some amazing positive sort of body positivity and incredible content around and inspiration around women doing amazing things as they age, I think we can sometimes feel that we shouldn't experience those feelings of loss around our identity or our appearance or our capabilities or any of those things, there's something shameful in feel, because we should just be embracing the next stage. And I think it's just recognizing that multiple ways of being and that those things can all be true at the same time. We can be excited about the future and at the same time we can recognize and grieve for what's past. And one doesn't cancel out the other. They can coexist, and that we may not also get to a place where we feel deeply content, that we may get to a place where we're still wrestling with all of those things. And on some days it will feel different. Some days we will look in the mirror and go, yes, this is great. I can take on the world. And other days we may go, actually, do you know what? That grey hair or that line or that exhaustion that I'm feeling, that really bothers me. Actually, that's not what it's not what I signed up for. And just accepting that is also part of it too, and it's okay. So I would love to know your thoughts on this about how we navigate those multiple different experiences of change, whatever that might look like in our lives. And it can be a change of job or losing our job even. I think there's something around transitions in life, whatever they look like, that bring up all sorts of different feelings at the same time. So if this has resonated you, if you've got any ideas or thoughts that you'd like to add, please do reach out. As always, you can find me on Instagram at Everyday Adventure Pod. You can come and find us on Substack. We've moved the podcast to Substack in the last sort of 6 months, and you can find all sorts of blogs, past episodes, conversations happening there. So please do come and check it out and subscribe if you fancy it. You can find me on LinkedIn, Nikki Bass, or you can check out my website, Resilience Work. That is a lot of different places you can go. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. It's so lovely to be back with you as always, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon with another episode. Take care. Bye.